Alright, so why I'm making this video right now is for anybody that's thinking about replacing their valve guides with bronze valve guides. Bronze valve guides are a great addition to any cylinder head, whether it's a stock cylinder head or it's a highly modified cylinder head. Bronze valve guides are a great addition. What bronze offers is better heat sink to the aluminum. A bronze valve guide wouldn't be a good choice for a cast iron head, but an aluminum head, they're the perfect fit. And also, they're self-lubricating in ways that they resist galling and they don't need as much oil. So within those characteristics, you can run a closer guide to valve clearance, all the way down to as low as 1.2 thousandths, whereas that's where I like to set my clearances at. Now, when you get valve guides from the manufacturer, this is something you need to know. Valve guides have to be clearanced. You need to go through them with a reamer. What the reamer is a elongated style drill bit. I'll show you a reamer that I have here. This is a style of reamer that I have. I have these in various different sizes for different size valve applications. And what the reamer does is the reamer allows you to get inside this guide and open it up. See how the reamer won't fit? Well, after you're done reaming it, going through the guide, you're gonna make it to the correct size. And you do this when the guide's installed in the head. Because if you do it before the guide's installed in the head, after you install the guide in the head, the interference fit between the cylinder head and the guide causes pressure on the valve guide. So you could have a guide that fits, you could have a valve that fits in the guide normally, like let's say this valve. So this is a brand new guide and it's a tight fit, but you could probably, yeah. So you could, this might feel nice when you get it, but once you install this guide in the head, this valve might not fit through because it's already up here rubbing. So you always need to install the guides and then size them. What I always do is ream them and then hone them to size. And I have basically inside diameter measuring devices that I can measure the width of the inside of the guide, and then I can put that into my hone, my rigid hone for them, and then I can size the guide. Now, some guides, like this guide, the valve does not fit through. As you can see, so this is the thing, all guides, so if that doesn't fit now when you installed it in the head, it would be even tighter. So you have to ream and hone all valve guides, and the reason I hone them is because just like a cylinder bore, you want that cross hatching. A cylinder bore and a valve guide are similar in the fact that they need cross hatching. The cross hatching helps with lubrication and retaining the oil into tight crevices that might get washed away without it. So that cross hatching with the honing is really important. Other tools you'll need to install guides is guide installation tool. Basically what I've found out is any valve guide installation tool under 7 millimeters, like I have other ones here, what happens is that the tip breaks off. And I am guilty of that. Sometimes the interference fit between the guide and the cylinder head is great, and when you're whaling on them, you might not have this dead straight and this little tip will break off. So I just ended up getting a new one of these in the mail. Plus you need the correct size guide installation tool for the correct size guide. They're all different, so you wouldn't want to buy, or I wouldn't want to use my 6 millimeter valve guide installation tool on my 6.5 millimeter valve guide, because that little tip, when it goes inside to the guide, if it's big and it's allowed to wobble, it'll score and make dents in the side of that guide. So having the right size guides down to a millimeter, not way less than a millimeter, a point of a millimeter, is very important. So what I use is 6.5 and 6.6 millimeter valve guide, depending upon the guide and the valve. Different manufacturer valves make different manufacturer valve guides, and the interference fit between the guide. And so say here we have two different valves. See, this valve doesn't fit into this guide, but there's another valve right here that fits right through this guide. So that's just to show you that different manufacturers, even though they're the same size stem, manufacture their stems with different, maybe a few hundred thousandths different clearance. So that's why it's very important to have somebody set up the head, because the valve job starts at the valve guide, and it's the most important part of your valve train. This is what keeps the valve straight on the seat, so it's all concentric. Without a proper clearanced valve guide, your valve's going to wobble and walk all over the place, and at high RPMs it's not going to have the time nor the ability to seal the valve properly. So a good valve job starts at the guide. So that's why I take so much time to source great guides that are very hard. There's different grades of bronze, like anything. You know, there's cheap bronze and there's good bronze. You know, so I pay $15 per guide, and I source them in large numbers. So I actually get a discount. But, you know, companies like some of the main companies out there, their guides aren't too great. So the bronze guides I source are perfect. That being said, even though they're perfect, they still need to be reamed and they still need to be honed. And that's done after they're installed in the head. So what you'll need to install a bronze valve guide is a valve guide removal and installation tool. And this is used with a hammer. You can also get ones that are used with an air chisel that have a different end. You can also use a hammer on that if you wanted to. After you get the guide out, you're going to put the guide in the freezer. You're going to make the guide really cold. After it's cold, the valve guide will shrink. Sometimes in different cases, you know, if the cylinder head puts up a fight when the guides are coming out. This hasn't come out yet, but sometimes when you do the welding on them, the guides come out hard. This welded head's not getting guides, but it doesn't need them. You know, if you have a cylinder head that puts up a fight when the guide's coming out, and you freeze the guide, sometimes you'd want to heat the head. In those situations where you know there's a lot of interference fit, go ahead, take your guide installation tool, put it on the valve guide, and insert it into the cylinder head from the other side. Actually, you would insert it into the cylinder head from this side, and you would hit that with a hammer and install the valve guide. Now, on some of the valve guides, depending upon the valve guides you get, they're all different because they're just companies that make them on a lathe. Now, depending upon the valve guide, it may or may not have a little ridge here as a stop. And also, depending upon your valve train setup, you might want to grind that off so you can sink the guide down to get more retainer to guide clearance on your valves underneath the valve spring. Sometimes that retainer will come down and hit the top of the guide. So what I'll do in high lift engines is I'll grind this. If I don't have the correct guides, most of the time in that situation, I'll just order a guide without this ring. But if I had only guides with rings, you can just grind this off, and then you'll be able to hammer this down enough so that you can get your piston or your retainer to guide clearance. But once you install the guide in the head, then what you're going to need is the reamer of the correct size. Now, reamers are very size oriented. You know, you need them to be measured with a micrometer. You need to measure your valve with the micrometer, and then you need to source a valve guide reamer that is the correct size. If you source a reamer, you know, you just source a 6.5 millimeter guide reamer, and that guide reamer comes in. You know, it might be small, it might be big. You might ream that guide out and then be in a world of problems, and your valve could be sloppy or still not fit. What you want is the guide reamer to be about 1/1000th bigger than the valve itself. And then the last 2/1000ths you want to basically hone to size. So that's the process to installing bronze valve guides. My name's Paul. This is Paul's Karts. If you need anything, you can call me at 781-492-7358. And I hope this video helped you guys. And until next time, have a great day.